Hi, welcome everyone. I can see people coming into the room. Hopefully you can see that you're in the right place. Today's webinar for Jigsaw PSHE 3 to 11, our guide to policy writing and consultation. If you're not a Jigsaw school, you are also very welcome. Hopefully there'll be some useful bits of information for you today as well. Just I never understand why when we open up the room, it doesn't let everyone in straight away. So we'll just give it another 30 seconds and then we will start. But while you're waiting, you might want to put your, please do use the chat box, put your name in the chat if you want and say maybe where you're from, or if you've got any burning questions that you particularly want answered today, please do feel free to put them in the box and we'll come back to those. I'm going to be leading the webinar. I'm not brilliant at multitasking. My colleague Becky is going to be looking at the chat and we will have questions at the end and be able to link to things through there. But I say while you're waiting, please do feel free to put something in the box or at any time in the chat boxes. So I think we've got quite a few people in now. I think we'll get going. So thank you for coming today. And this is one of our series of webinars that we have been running about the new RSHE guidance. We've already had some about what the changes are, about what the changes are in our Jigsaw materials. So, please do go back and look at those. We're not going to be recovering any of that content. So you may want to go back to some of those, and there are recordings of those available on the portal. And if you're not a Jigsaw school, on our main website as well. Today, as I said, our focus is on policy writing and consultation, and we've got some more coming up, which I will talk about in a little bit. So just so that those of you that haven't been long before, my name is Sarah. I am the programme lead for the Jigsaw PSHE 3 to 11 programme. And we're working really hard to try and make the process of moving from using the new guidance as easy as possible for you, and this is part of it. So we'll just start with saying where we are now. We know there's a lot going on. So what we want to do is really take you through this as sort of step-by-step process. So as I'm sure you're all aware, the guidance came out in July, the new RSHE guidance for schools in England. We've been updating the content, and today where we are is we are looking about actually how to plan and build a policy that's right for your school. So you make it worthwhile. If we're going to do this, make it worthwhile, make it relevant, and make it useful. And so we're hoping that after this, what you'll then do is you'll feel ready to go away to draft, consult on, and really get going with updating your policy in good time for September. So that's where we are at the moment. What we're going to cover today, hopefully it's a quite short webinar, a half-hour webinar with questions afterwards. But we're just going to go through some of the main points about what has to go in your policy and the statutory, what's statutory and what's best practice, that the two should run alongside. Just draw upon what's non-statutory for primary schools, how you can go through that process step by step. I'm going to do a little bit on consultation as well, and give you some sort of practical tools to help you through that. So hopefully that's what you're expecting. So I know I talk about guidance a lot at the moment, but it's actually, this is our starting point for developing the policy. So I just want to go back to what's in the guidance. And if you're ever really sure about, well, why is Jigsaw saying that? Or how do I know that's right? Or is this something that I'm going to be supported with? Am I going in the right direction? It can be really useful to go back to that guidance. And if you go back to last year's guidance, in the introductory section, you will see it. The introductory bit is actually quite short, and it does lay out really clearly what those policy expectations are, who the responsibility lies with, and the information about the guiding principles and the right to withdraw. We're going to look at some of those, but do go back and have a look at that. It's not really long, and it's just useful to know that it's there. So what we've got in there is you see this bit here. So we know from that, it's really clear, as in the 2019 guidance, but now as well, that all schools do have to have an up-to-date policy for relationships education and where you teach sex education for sex education as well. So that's where this RSE term comes in. And then beyond that as well, unlike other curriculum areas, and we're going to look at this a little bit more about how you need to proactively engage and consult parents. So there's a real drive, a real clarity about this need to not only do you need to have this written policy for RSE, but you need to engage with parents. And then you'll see we've got RSHE coming back in there as well. So what this tells you is that you must have you have the RSE policy published on your website. So that's the relationships education, and where you're teaching it, sex education. Statutorily, you don't have to have the health education there, but we would argue, and it is good practice, it is accepted good practice to have your health education as well. If we're teaching about relationships education and we're teaching about sex, and we've got sex education and it's all in together, why wouldn't you put that in the context of health education? And we would say wider PSHE as well. You'll see there as well, it also says in that quote that RSHE is really important for promoting and protecting the well-being of all children. There's a strong safeguarding aspect coming through this. So we would really recommend that policy that you do have to publish on your school website for RSE is wider. It's a PSHE policy, and it's got all those links across that are really important as well to those other policies, and so such as, for example, such as safeguarding and the other personal development. So that policy needs to be available free of charge to anyone who requests it. So putting it on your website or being able to give people a copy of it on paper is really important. And you've got to keep it up to date and reflective of current practice. So what that's telling you is that we now have new guidance, and you do need to update your policy so that it is in line with that new guidance. So that's hopefully quite straightforward. And what you've got to do, the question is how to do that and what should go in it. I would also draw to your attention, I have mentioned it before in these webinars, how on page 5 of that guidance, we've got these 7 key principles that should underpin all of our RSHE curriculum development. And these are really positive, and that's why I keep pulling back to them, because it can be, when you're looking through a list of requirements and things we need to teach, it can feel quite overwhelming. It can feel quite negative, but actually, this is the important stuff that children need to know, and this is the really positive environment that we put it in. So we're going to go through that and how you can consider that in your policy a little bit later, but do be aware that that is the context we're putting all of this in. And also that introductory section, we're going to return to a little bit, but again, if somebody says to you, well, what's the law? What do we have to teach? What are the rules, particularly around sex education? This is the thing that, although it's a tiny, tiny part of what you are going to be teaching in PSHE, even if you do decide, which most schools do, to teach the recommended sex education, it's something where there is a lot of questions about it. So it is really clear that it is compulsory. So it's statutory for primary schools to be teaching the relationships education, the health education that's in there, and that the sex education is non-statutory, but it is recommended, but it's now very clearly in years 5 and 6. And you can see that, again, we're not going to go into secondary content today. In secondaries, they have to teach that sex education. It has to be, they have to teach it. Of course, there are, of course, right to withdraw aspects as well. But so you don't have to teach sex education, but it is recommended. Even though the guidance says that you only have to have a clear statement about your sex education if you are teaching it, we would say that if you're not teaching it, you need to say that in your policy as well, and why you're not, because that's really helpful as well for you to have clear understanding across the whole of your school community. I don't just mean parents, I mean all teachers, staff and governors as well. So a little bit more on that. So again, we've got further documents to help and support you with this, but just we are getting lots of questions in about this at the moment. So I thought I'd just go straight in with it right at the beginning of this webinar. So in primary schools, parents and carers have the right to withdraw from the non-statutory parts of RSHE, which we expect you to deliver as part of your wider PSHE. That's why I've put both together there. So parents and carers have the right to withdraw from that from sex education within your PSHE and your RSHE. But they do not have the right to withdraw from any sex education that you teach through science. So if your school in year 5 or year 6 has chosen to have humans as the examples of mammals for reproduction, that is statutory sex education. But even if you are teaching sex education in science and you're using almost exactly the same wording, but you're teaching it as part of your planned RSHE, that then becomes RSHE and the right to withdraw still stands. You can't say, well, we're only teaching the scientific parts through PSHE, so really it's science. You need to be really clear. If you teach it as part of RSHE, if you teach sex education as part of RSHE in primary, it is RSHE and it is non-statutory sex education. So you do need to make sure that you have that really clear understanding on that. And although the new guidance is a little bit clear about what's puberty, we still recommend that you have a very clear understanding as a staff about what you mean by sex education, so that parents, carers really understand that as well. And you can all speak about it confidently and teach it confidently as well. And we've got some webinars coming up about sex education, I think at the beginning of the summer term. So we can help you talk about that a little bit more at that time. But there really is a difference between those two. So just be really aware that there is a difference. Then the next part of the guidance splits into the bit that we're not actually going to be talking about today, which is a change for me, about the really clear descriptive guidance on all the relationship standards that you're going to be teaching. So the exact statutory content has to be met by the end of primary, and the health and well-being aspects as well. The sex education is in brackets there because, as discussed, it's not statutory. But just be very aware that the guidance makes it clear that those statements need to be taught by the end of primary, and then the secondary ones by the end of secondary. So your RSE policy, you're probably going to want to lay out a little bit more about how you're teaching those at different ages, but it is up to you as a school to decide when and how you teach that. Obviously in Jigsaw, we're looking at a spiral approach, so we're revisiting those topics all the time. So that's what you can go back to the guidance for. And then the end of the guidance, there I call it the third part, then does a little bit more, draws out much more detail, or maybe on things like LGBT and faith and all of those aspects, which you might want to use to inform what you do. But let's go back to policy. We've kind of sort of dived in a little bit to some of those things that people do ask questions about straight off that are statutory to sort of make clear on your policy. These are the things that you need to do. Now, I'm going to go through these quite quickly because you can see on the screen there is a picture of a document, and we will direct you either in a follow-up to this. I think we may have some school support. We can put it in the chat box now as well. But we have got documents on the website now which will guide you through exactly what I'm talking about today. And one of these is this checklist. It's with your policy content requirements. So all of this is on there, and then there's an expanded document, which I'll show you again later, which goes through everything we're talking about. So these are things you need to do. These are the things which are expected in the DfE guidance. You need to set out your subject content, what will be taught, how and when. That doesn't mean that your policy has to have the complete details of every single lesson. It's an overview of what you're going to be teaching, how and when. Remember I said it has to be taught by the end of primary, but you will want to maybe set out, or you will want to set out a little more about when things will be taught. Who is responsible for it? You're going to need to differentiate, as I mentioned already, what's sex education, but also relationships and puberty. Right to withdrawal, so that's all coming back to that sex education aspect. It needs to be, how are you going to manage that? How are you going to inform parents about that? That needs to be laid out as well. You need to show how you've thought about, planned, how you're making content accessible for SEND, how it's monitored and evaluated in your school. And I'm afraid there's another slide because I couldn't fit it all on one. You also need to set out how parents can view your curriculum material. So as I said, the document needs to give an overview. It doesn't need to give all the detail, but actually if parents want to see that content, how can they? And also really clear in the guidance, you need to say how teachers are going to handle questions about the topics that aren't covered. So if a child might bring up a question about something that you've chosen not to teach, but how will teachers handle those types of questions? What might they do to manage that in the classroom in an appropriate way? And then how the policy was produced, the review, all of those aspects which you would expect to see. So what I would recommend you do is you have a look and think, actually, let's start from where we are. What's in your current policy? So a lot of you here will have really great policies that are, that you've managed to keep up to date, that are covering a lot of these things already. So look at where you are. You won't necessarily have to start from scratch, and see what it addresses first. You'll have that checklist, and then you can take this sort of step-by-step approach. And we've kind of outlined sort of 5 steps you can do to help you do this. And again, so don't worry about writing all of this down. All of this is on the documents that we can give you to go with it. So I've already covered step 1. Start with your existing policy. What have you already got in place? How are you already talking to people about PSHE in your school community? How are you already linked PSHE to your other key school policies? That's the first step. So once you've managed to do that as a PSHE lead, then you can take that and you can meet with staff and governors. What do they want to see? What do they understand by this? How do they feel about the current policy? What else might they think needs to go in it? And make sure you engage your staff. So this webinar is about consultation. It's not specifically about parent consultation. We have another webinar in 2 weeks about that. It's really important sometimes with RSHE, because there's so much talk about parental consultation, which is really important. We forget about the importance of consultation actually within the school, the expertise that we've got. What is it that our other members of staff in the school know about the pupils? What are they hearing? How do they feel about what's being taught? What do governors feel? What's working well? All of those aspects are really important as well. And then we'll move, and then of course, so doing this then before you go on and talk to pupils and parents is a really important thing. And I think it's important not to leave it out. So once you've had that, then you can take that to draft your update to your policy and use that checklist to check those statutory requirements. And things like agreeing your approach to sex education, and then you can start getting together any supporting documents, whether that's from us at Jigsaw PSHE about the content, or from your local area, or other information you think might be useful. And then you're in a really strong position to talk to parents and pupils further, because it's important that everyone's using the same language, that everyone understands what's meant by different phrases before you have those conversations. So that's a step ahead of myself, as always. When you can really look at engaging parents, carers, and pupils. Share your policy. You may want to hold meetings. It does depend. You don't have to hold meetings as a primary school. A lot of schools do it. It's a really good way of inviting parents in. But for some schools, they know that actually that's not the best way. They've got other systems in place that are much better for engaging with parents from all different parts of the school community. But really think about finding ways to engage with as wider range of parents and pupils as possible. Now, it might be that in the last year, you've had ongoing engagement going on with parents, and that can inform this. You don't have to start from scratch. If you've been delivering PSH, you've been delivering Jigsaw for a long time, you'll find that there's a lot that, because we were already meeting so much of what's in there, there's a lot that you will already have. So you can use that parental engagement to inform it, just as you can use pre-existing pupil engagement about what is it children in your school enjoy, what have they told you in Jigsaw lessons, what have your school council, there's different systems you've got set up. What are you hearing from children? What do you know about what you're hearing from pastoral leads? You can use all of that information. It's not about starting all of this from scratch. So use what you've got and then look at what else you might need to find out, and how can you continue to build that in the future as well. So once you've got all of that, then you can bring that in to inform your policy, and keep a record of what you've done. All those things I've just said about, wow, you may have this, you may have that already. Make a note of it. We know that this policy should not be about answering external, validating what you've done with people asking externally, whether that be Ofsted, trust, parents, all of those people. But actually it can be a really helpful thing to have, so that when they come in, you've got that, and then your conversations that you can have can then be freer and easier and explanatory and more positive and move you forward. So that's a really helpful thing to have as well. And of course that engagement of governors, which should be going on through this as well, and planning your ongoing engagement cycle. So I know I've just said, well, it's really easy, you just have to do all of this. And I know there's a lot there, but actually I think you'll find you're already going to have a lot. So what we've got to help you with this, again, it's going to vary so much from school to school, is if you go onto the Get Ready for September 26 part of the portal, we have got a Jigsaw guide to policy review and consultation that takes you through all of this. So what I've said today is kind of like a watered down version, what I'm talking about today, of what's in that document. If you're not a Jigsaw school, I'll show you at the end, we do also have a steps to success document, which is a bit broader. It's got links to some Jigsaw materials, but it's actually got links to some other things that you could access as well. But if you're a Jigsaw school, this is really targeted to what we've got in our materials and what's there to support you. So if you have a look at that, just looking a bit to see, you'll see there's like, I mentioned that step-to-step guide, step-by-step guide of how to review your policy. So in section 6, I had review your starting point. It actually then bullet points the different things that you could do in order to do that. So you can look through and go, well, that doesn't apply to us. Oh, that does. I haven't thought of that. Or actually, it might just spark ideas of what you could do beyond the things that we've suggested, because we know there's always loads going on in schools that we haven't thought of. And you can see step 2, meet with staff and governors. There's a whole list of bullets of things that you can do. And then it goes through steps 3, 4, and 5. And there is, that's just part of that long document. There's a whole document on how to do it. So it's on the website in the RSHE Ready for 2020, Get Ready for September 2026 section. But we can send out links to that in an email afterwards. But that's all there for you. I don't think I can say that anymore. I've gone on about it a bit. So all of that is there for you. But I'm sure that most people here today are probably PSHE leads, who are going to be the ones who are behind the drafting, the writing, and organising all of this. So it's really useful just to go back a little bit about consultation and about why we consult on RSHE and PSHE. And I've separated them out. I'm seeing RSHE as part of your wider PSHE, because of course your PSHE is wider. We're going to have aspects of citizenship, we're going to have aspects of financial education, all those other bits that go beyond just what's statutory. And we don't consult in this way on other curriculum areas. So RSE, the bit that you absolutely have to consult on, is the bit that you is statutorily you have to do. So relationships and sex education, you have to consult on. It's a statutory expectation. So that's one of the reasons, but it's definitely not the only one. But we all think it's really good practice to do it as part of that wider RSHE and PSHE. I've already said that. So why? We've got our sensitive subjects. So the topics that we are discussing in PSHE, some of them are quite straightforward, but we know that there are some where they're a little bit more sensitive. And they're not the ones that are always obviously sensitive. So things like maybe we're looking at different types of families. For some people, that's really, really straightforward. But for some, that can be a little bit more sensitive when you've got children at school from families, and they may feel that their families are different, or they may not, but they may be worried about how people are going to view their families. So through that consultation, we can talk to teachers, pupils, parents, governors. Actually, are we thinking about everyone? How can we make sure that everyone feels included and valued? And that's just one of the many topics. Also, we're demonstrating through consultation the values that we are trying to teach through our PSHE, that respect for relationships. So we're modeling how listening is important, how we take into account different people's views, different people's experiences. So it's part of that whole school approach that we've got. There's also that shared responsibility. We know that children aren't just learning from their class teacher in the classroom, they're learning from staff across the whole of the school, from families, and from what they're seeing in the school community beyond. So it might be that if you work closely with the school nurses, or with faith groups, all of those. So it's not just classroom and family, it's those wider groups as well. So you may be consulting with those groups and making sure that we are listening to all of those different views and enabling them to see what we're teaching in school and seeing that this is something that we are all doing together to support children and young people. And also, because of all these different messages and because of these sensitive things, if we've all got confidence, we all know what we're doing and the direction we're going in, it can really help us to feel comfortable with how we discuss and teach all of those different topics. So it's actually a really positive thing to be doing. And that's why it's really great to keep it as an ongoing process. So use what works for your school. So I've already mentioned that before, but I can't remember who it is. One of the schools we work with was saying that actually when they are wanting to talk, we're not talking about parents today, but to talk to parents, they said, well, actually, sometimes we just put up a table in the playground, we bring out our PSHE stuff, and then we just chat to parents while they're waiting to pick their children up. So that's very informal, but what a great way of maybe engaging parents who wouldn't engage in other ways. So use what works for your school. So it might be formal, it might be informal. So it might be just staff meetings, or just, when you're chatting in the staff room, if you're managing to get a lunch break. Things like governor briefings, whether that's in person or on paper, looking at what you've got with assessment and evaluation of what's been taught, parent care meetings, newsletters, all those things that you've got. But what is key in your policy and is in the guidance as a statutory expectation is that you are proactively engaging with parents and carers. And I would extend that to be proactive with everybody as part of that consultation. So sharing your draft policy, with making sure that the governors are really clear on it as well, and all staff. It's amazing how sometimes teachers and teaching assistants get left out of that process. Publicize what you're doing in the ways that you've already got that that work, but maybe through this process you might find some new ways through discussion with other Jigsaw schools or with other local schools, and using your web. You could then maybe use your website as a hub for sort of FAQs and resources as well. And again, it's listening to the conversations that are ongoing. As I said, I'm not going to focus on parent carer because we are going to come back to that. But it is just a reminder that when we talk about parent carer consultation, it is okay for you to be clear and set what those boundaries are. So there's an extract there from the DfE guidance about, parents are not able to veto curriculum content, but schools must consult with parents when developing their RSHE policy, and it's right that they are able to see what their children are being taught. So it's about inviting parents in, inviting their views, all parents, and listening to what they've got to say. And quite often you might go, do you know what, I hadn't thought of that. That's something we haven't realized. We'll make sure we build something in. We'll adapt some of the lessons. We might change some wording. But at the end of the day, you are the professionals. You are the ones who understand the guidance and know you are the one who are balancing the needs of the whole class and what's needed against what you statutorily have to teach. So you really need to listen and explain what you're doing. And that's really important so that parents feel listened to, and that they trust what you're doing. But at the end of the day, it is up to you, and parents cannot just say no, especially to something that's statutory content. So it's okay to feel confident in making that clear if you need to. And then as long as you're doing that, you'll be able to demonstrate how you've considered those views. So just to say, as I said, I'm not going to say any more on parental consultation. We've got this webinar on the 17th of March about engaging parents with PSHE. So that we'll cover more in that in future. But just to say, we have, in case you're thinking ahead to that as well, just to say, I've got a spelling mistake on there. Sorry, just realized that. We've got downloadable PowerPoint that you can use with staff that is on the website now. So it's downloadable so you can adapt it. So for your consultation with your staff, you can use that and make changes to it. So it's using a lot of our slides, but you can make it applicable to your school. We've got all of our overview documents as well. There's also, when we talk about consulting with governors, we have got our recorded webinar that we did for governors as well on the website, without spelling mistake on with there. Apologies for that. And we're building more and more. We've got a range of parent care materials, slideshow, and that webinar coming up that can support you through that. So very quickly, looking at the time, those 7 guiding principles. Oh, thank you. I can see Ruth is putting links up to all of those things in the chat box at the moment. Thank you, Ruth. Let's go back to those guiding principles. So although there is a lot to put together, actually, hopefully the step-by-step process will take you through what you need to put in your policy and what would be good practice to put in your policy and how to make those links. And then we've also got these questions. Again, this is all built in as well to that guidance about these guiding principles that are really important. So the first one is engagement with pupils. So this is the quote there is what's in the guidance. So, how are you making sure that your content is inclusive and well sequenced? So there we've written out some questions that you can consider. So once you've drafted your policy and you have a look at what's in there, you can sort of think, actually, you can just double check some of these things. How are you gathering feedback from pupils about their PSHE learning, and where do they have opportunities to share what they find helpful? So there's just questions to help prompt you through it. The second one of those, engagement and transparency with parents. Again, we're going to talk more about that in that webinar. How do you make sure that your material is available for parents? Do you inform them in advance? And there are lots of little questions that you can sort of just think about that we've laid out as well in our draft policy template, which I haven't mentioned. So again, alongside all of this, we have got a draft policy template with examples of what you can say, in all of these aspects. Start with where you are now, but again, look at our draft policy to support that too. Positivity. So again, this is one of the 7 guiding principles. Your PSHE curriculum needs to focus on building positive attitudes and skills. And it's trying to keep your policy feeling like that as well. It can be difficult when there's all of this to go through. And of course, we're looking to prevent harms. But we want to make sure that you make it clear in your policy that you want to avoid this language that normalizes harmful behaviors and stigmatizes groups of pupils. So, does your curriculum support that? Also, that careful sequencing. So again, if you're using Jigsaw PSHE, you will already have careful sequencing built out for you, so that pupils are equipped with that knowledge before they encounter these situations in real life. But you may find that children in your school are encountering some more risk-taking behaviors, for example, earlier than maybe other pupils across the UK. And you may look at that and go, we need to move that content forward. We need to make those changes. So that's a decision that you can make. Or you may decide, actually, our pupils really aren't ready for that. We're going to move that a little bit later on, and we'll move something else earlier. So have a look at that and make sure that you've made those decisions and that those are reflected in your planning and your policy. And this is similar in some ways, relevant and responsive, but again, different communities may have different needs, and different schools are able to work in different ways with people in their community. So think about how you've worked that. I already mentioned school nurses and faith groups as an example. The skill delivery aspect. So this has really been picked up quite a bit through the RSHE guidance last year, the need to make sure that school staff feel confident, that they have the knowledge and the skills that they need to develop high quality PSHE. So part of that consultation process can be having those conversations. What training would be useful? How are you going to build in going forwards? Evaluating whether staff might need more support or more training. Is that training needed? What can you start to put into place? And also that will be relevant to other aspects of your school policies, such as safeguarding, which comes through very strongly as well. And that whole school approach. If you're a Jigsaw PSHE school, you'll be hearing a whole school approach from us all the time. But that's because it's something which we really value very highly. So again, there's a lot in Jigsaw PSHE that brings the teaching out of the classroom into the rest of the school. But we know that schools are doing much more than just what we've got there as well. So how does it connect to your behavior, for example, your safeguarding policies? It's not just writing in the policy that it does. If somebody would say, well, how does it connect? Actually having that information. That's why that consultation with other people, other teachers, adults in your schools, SLT, is really important, because actually having those conversations with the people maybe who are responsible for those, how could you bring those things closer together? That's really key too. And engaging and training of governors is important too, just drawing on that. Governors have a statutory expectation as well to be involved in this process. So find out who the governor is that is maybe linked for RSHE as a first point, and direct them to some of our materials if that's helpful for you, or sit and talk through with them some of these things. And I said, we've got an on-demand webinar that they can look. They don't even have to log into the portal for that one, but they can watch that and have a look at it. But make sure they're engaged, because they can really help with community confidence. So what we've got to support you with all of this is we've got the policy templates, we've got that guide to policy review, we've got the policy review checklist. We've also got a document about what do schools have to teach for RSHE, which can be really helpful for sharing. It could be helpful for you as a lead, but again, with your governors, with SLT, with other people, about what is it that actually has to go in this as part of this process. And there is a parent version of it as well. And then we've got all of these other documents to support the safeguarding guidance, digital literacy, protected characteristics. There is some, the safeguarding one is on its way. It really is. It's in draft. We're trying to get it ready right now for you as soon as possible. But, just go back and start with your policy first. You can see on the right up here, it's all in this Get Ready for September 2026 section of the webinar, of the portal. So we have also got this, which we will send out post-webinar, which is a sort of a broader guide to, if you want a one-page guide of how to get ready, we'll send you that as well. And that's a useful one too. So I'm going to stop there. It's quite enough of me. But if you want to find out about other webinars coming up, that QR code there, if you flash your phone at it, should bring those up, but you can just go onto the website. But I'm going to leave that up for a second. And Becky, how many questions have we got? Where are we with it?
Brilliant. Thank you, Sarah. Ruth's been really busy attaching documents and links, so quite a lot of the questions have been answered, but we have still got a few, Sarah, that I
Okay.
would like to see if we can answer today for our people on the call. So, first one, should we call it RSE or RSHE policy?
It depends what you're going to put in it, I think is the answer to that. I hope you imagine, get my hands out now, the PSHE is kind of the umbrella at the top. And within PSHE, you've got your relationships, your sex, and your health education, the RSHE. So RSHE is part of PSHE. So if you're teaching Jigsaw PSHE, for example, there's quite a bit of citizenship in there. The two easiest ones to say, there's quite a bit of citizenship and there's quite a bit of, there's some financial education, careers and goals and that type of thing as well. So they're not RSHE, but I imagine your policy is going to want to include everything that you are teaching within PSHE. So we would recommend that you have a PSHE policy, including RSHE. You only have to publish, engage on the relationships and the sex education. But then it's a bit disjointed because you're kind of having to say, well, the relationship, oh yes, well, actually, it's joined up to all of these things and you're explaining the context. So statutorily, it's only the relationships and the sex bit, the RSE, but we would recommend you have a wider PSHE policy.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sarah. Another one from an infant school. So a challenge is that in their infant school, it is sometimes difficult to know what we must include or don't need because we stop at year two.
Yes, it is tricky because the guidance says everything is by the end of primary school.
Mm,
I mean, it gives you a little bit of freedom, bit of leeway, but the reality is that so you're not going to be teaching sex education in an infant school. I think I can state that quite confidently.
yeah.
Um, but so that aspect, you're not going, and you can put that in your policy as we are an infant school,
Yeah.
we will not be, it is not age appropriate and we do not include any sex education. So there is no right to withdraw from any of our PSHE. That might be one of the aspects that you want to state with that.
Yeah.
I mean, we would recommend that. I mean, I'm assuming that this is a Jigsaw school. It it the gist of it basically for all of this is what you decide to teach as a school as is age appropriate for the children in your school is statutory RS unless it's sex education. So you can look at those materials and decide what you feel is appropriate. And if you think some is really not appropriate for your children, that's fine. You can take it out, but be aware that of where those children are going to for year 3, year 4, year 5, and year 6, because what will they need to know before they reach year 3, 4, 5, and 6? So if you're an infant school, specific school you're going on to, I would have a conversation with them.
Brilliant. Thank you,
It's difficult.
Sarah.
It's difficult to nail it down any
Yeah,
further.
I've got a couple more. Can I double check that we should still be reporting on PSHE in our annual school reports to parents?
Oh gosh, I should know this one. Might have to get back to you. I think it's not. I think it changes from different areas because sometimes it's different in different trusts as opposed to local authorities. So what's statutory, what's advised, what's in different areas can change. I think it's a lot of schools are people might be able to come on and say are reporting on personal development now. Um,
Okay, we can look into that,
yeah,
can't we?
that's a really good question. I
Yeah,
will need to check that and we can send out an email and clarify that in our follow-up email.
brilliant. Thank you. I kind of know the answer to this one. Will we be sharing the slides from today?
Uh, yes, we we will be sharing the slides. But what we tend to do is we put them up on the portal. We have the webinar and a downloadable a PDF of the slides to go with it. But to be honest, the documents are probably more useful.
There is a question around the steps to success document,
Yeah.
which I think you've already answered, but just to clarify for those people on the call, where can people find the steps to success document?
We will send that out. That's one that I will send that out because I'm not sure that it's on the portal. It might be on the main website, but I will send it out to, I will put it in the follow-up email to send out.
Brilliant, thank you. And there is two more questions, Sarah. Is there any guidance for specialist SEM provisions? Is it stage and not age for RSE?
So, yeah, I mean, SCND, there is a paltry, there is a, I'm just going to stop sharing my screen a second. There is a real lack of guidance for SEND and PSHE. Again, if you're a specialist provision, it's going to be slightly different to SEND in a mainstream school. In
Yeah,
mainstream, you will be needing to deliver all the statutory content by the end of primary. And actually, it really depends on what those needs are. We will be updating. We haven't quite got around to sorting it out yet. We will be updating our SEND. We've got an SEND mapping document that maps to the PSHE Association stages, and we will be updating that. Really, we know that most SEND schools will take the content and will look and see what is appropriate for the pupils in their care. And what those SEND schools tend to tell us is that it's really good to have content which actually does cover some of the trickier aspects, certainly when it comes to things like puberty, because those children are more vulnerable and they need that content. Not more, but certainly equally, they can be very vulnerable. So I'm really wary to say, don't need to teach stuff, because that's not the case at all.
yeah.
But I think we will update that document, but there is no more specific guidance from the DFE on it, unfortunately, apart from use high quality materials.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sarah. And one more just around church schools. Is there a new model policy for church schools?
There isn't. I am planning on talking about doing that, but I will have to be totally honest. We did the large template. We do refer to what church within it, that if you are a church school, things that you might want to consider. And since this new guidance came out, along with the DFE also released an impact report for protected characteristics from it. Actually, there isn't anything in there that doesn't apply. That guidance is for all schools.
Yeah.
It is not the case if you are a faith school that you do not have to teach any of that statutory content, that any of that content does not apply to you. So one of the reasons it hasn't been a great priority, I'll be honest, is because I cannot see it being different.
Yeah.
That's where we are. So I would pick it up and have a look at it. I said we have got some bits in it where we do refer to church schools.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sarah, for answering those questions. I think we've answered everyone's questions, which is fantastic. And people who are still on the call, please do remember we will be sending out the recording with the slides on a PDF. Apologies, there is one more. Very
I've
specific.
Just seen one. I've just seen a couple pop up. They're always the good ones that come at the end.
Very specific question that came up through consultation. Masturbation is included in year 6. Where has that come from in regards to the guidance?
So it hasn't come specifically from the guidance. It was in our previous materials as well in year 6. We've had it in Jigsaw since 2013. It's not new. So there are some specific words related to changing to developing bodies, as it's called. It used to be called changing adolescent bodies. I think anyway, developing bodies is called now, for external genitalia. But there aren't any other words that are specifically listed. What is listed is that children need to be prepared for puberty. and the changes that come. Um, so we have it fits with what we've always done. So what we
Yeah.
have in our content is we have aspects of puberty that children may have heard about, things they may know about, parts of the body that they know that they have, and words for them. So I might as well say at the same time, masturbation and clitoris is the other thing that we have in that year 6 lesson as well. So what we do is we feel that knowledge of these words and just explaining in a very matter of fact way what they are is relevant and important for young people to acknowledge that these things, we don't want to make these things totally taboo or feel that they can't ask questions if they don't know what they mean. So the way that we include them, you will notice, is that they are at no point put on any of the slides. They are not in worksheets in a like a worksheet that gets handed out. Where they are is they are in a resource where you cut up the cards and you share them out and children turn them over and talk about what they might be. So they are intentionally included in those lessons so that if you as a school feel, do you know what, that's not appropriate, we don't want to have that in for our children, you just take it out. And that's how they're included. But we find that most schools do include them and feel that they are entirely appropriate. These are children who will be leaving to go to secondary school in a matter of weeks. So it is that age group.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sarah. I think we've answered all the questions there on the chat. Thank you, everybody, for attending this evening. And like Sarah said, we've got an extensive webinar calendar over the next few weeks and months. So please join and register whichever ones you feel appropriate for you. Thanks, everyone.